Welcome to the Light Home Sustainable Design podcast series. We talk with the architects and builders about green design and homes that really suit the way we love to live. I'm Amanda Faulkner, and today I'm talking to architect Ed Ewers, one of our Light Home Design ambassadors, about his ambassador's choice, the Treehouse, designed by architects Jackson Clements Burrows.
It's a standout, lightweight house. It's eye-catching. It's innovative. It's fairly it's fairly difficult construction with complex construction with cantilevers and a steep site. But it's very striking, and in actual fact, when you break it down, it would have been quite a nice, simple little house to build.
Okay, so let's just explore that for a second, because on one hand you're saying that it's complex construction, and of course the steep site poses some difficulties, but it's also simple to build. So can you explain that a little bit more for us?
The home has a central core and then a couple of cantilevers that come off it.
Yeah.
Now the cantilevers require some reasonable components of steel and foundations, which require a little bit more skill and forethought and engineering. But once they're in place, then it's a very simple box that's just built over the top of these complex substructures. It doesn't have a very big footprint on the ground, but once this steel or the core is in fact put in place, then the rest of it are very simple little boxes to build. Lightweight, just windows and compressed sheet on a grid.
And do you think that in coming up with that approach, that's part of what the architect has done particularly well, or are there other things that you point out?
Well, I think that's the key to this home, is that they've done something that is obviously very striking, that obviously works well on a steep site. And I think because of the site, they said, well, how do we do this? Do we step it? And I have spoken to them about the home, I'm not suggesting this is their thoughts, but I wouldn't be surprised if their thoughts were, well, rather than step a home, cover a lot of ground and step it down the site, let's come out of the site and then set a base level. And then rather than having lots of areas that have to touch the ground and have footings and whatever, let's minimise that and hang everything off it.
Okay, I understand that now. And so, with that in mind, could you have done this kind of home with heavyweight construction?
Not easily, no. Yes, you could. You can do anything if you throw enough structure and money at it, I suppose. But it would have been significantly over the top to do it in any other method, I think.
And how do you think the design suits the Australian climate, and actually the specific local climate? Because this is on the Great Ocean Road in Victoria, isn't it?
It is. Well, what it does really well is two things which nearly all of coastal Victoria, particularly the Great Ocean Road, has this sort of yin and yang problem in that your view face is south and our best light comes from the north. So often you have this compromise between view and solar impact, I suppose. They've managed to treat that reasonably well. They've elevated the home a little bit, which helps open it up to better northern vantage, which is lifting it above the site, I suppose, lifting it out of the canopy. They've also they've got a couple of little sort of pop-up or highlight roofs that enable or clerestory windows. In effect, they're sort of a contemporary clerestory window that gives the opportunity for north light to sink into the home. Mm-hmm. And then, off this central core, there's a south and east and a west wing, or a pod that's hung off this central core, and each one of those would have different advantages, not just to a view and an aspect, but also to a prevailing wind or a cooling wind or a warming sun, depending on the time of year and time of day. So I guess the home, whilst some sections of it, each one of these pods may perform better at a different time of day. That gives the home such great flexibility.
Right. And so
So rather than saying, look, this is a solar house,
Yep.
That's to hell with the view and let's just raise it to the north and put our pergolas on it and suck up the northern sun, they've said, well, the home's about the view and the sight and the hill, but let's not ignore the need for, a nice environment within. And I think, perhaps the east pod gives you good morning light, some morning warmth, and perhaps even some relief from the hot western summer sun. And then conversely, the west does the opposite, and the south does something else again because it's about the view, but also the south is offset with this clerestory window that sucks in north sun.
Mm. And so, sorry, go on.
Go on.
So in relation to making the home comfortable, so on one hand it's highly flexible, with these pods that you talk about, but in, I guess, responding to both heat and cold, in what other ways does it use materials, for example, to help deliver that sort of comfort?
Well, I think they've probably thought about certainly cross ventilation and where the worst of where they don't want sun to come in and where they would like it to come in, so that the home is orientated and the position of windows, I think, has been really considered to give that right balance between lifestyle and climate and amenity.
Mm.
And I think the simple lightweight construction thereafter, can easily be insulated accordingly to our climate. And you've got to remember, southern Victoria does get quite cool in winter, but I think this building has an opportunity. It's really a series of sunrooms, and I think that you could live in any sunroom at a different time of the day.
That's a lovely image, actually. And just with that thought in mind, obviously the way that it's dealt with the site and in, having those rooms that can take advantage of the climate depending upon the season, what other, that's sustainable in itself, but what other aspects of the home, to your knowledge, are also sustainable?
Well, on the face of it, the bits that come to mind are obviously, the impact on the terrain, and I know where it is, and I know that because I've done projects down nearby. The local council has quite strict environmental guidelines on the way you use the land. You have to do a land capability study and assessment before you can construct anything or cut or excavate in there, even though you own the land, but in their district. And I think this is a clever adaptation on that by taking everything above the ground, so that the core touches the ground, so the footprint and the impact on scratching the dirt and cutting and chiselling and levelling is really only round about perhaps a third of the total footprint, rather than having a home that had to scratch and manipulate the tea tree and the other indigenous sort of landscape. They've really minimised that, and I think that's they've done that very well, and I'm sure that part of that would have been driven by the demands of council.
And, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, but their response is really quite a good one.
And in terms of its sort of cost-effective construction, part of it is, as you say, minimising the impact on the site and therefore the excavation, etc., that needs to happen. But is there anything else that you can point to that suggests that this is a cost-effective way to build?
As I say, that once you've got the core in and everything else is really a flat plate of a floor to work off. It's built on a grid, clearly, so that the whole set out of the home is designed around panel and window sizes. That's efficient.
And would have meant there was probably very little wastage.
Yeah, correct. simpler to build and simpler to price up and really think about how you get materials to and from the site. I don't think there would have been a lot of excess during construction. And I mean, the cantilevers are a really significant part of the idea. There's no doubt about that, and there's some cost incurred in that, but I reckon that's offset against the reduced impact to the site. But once you've got that structure in place, there's not complex roofs, there's not flashy changes of materials. The rest of it is really pragmatic.
Okay, great. Now, is there anything else that you would like to draw our attention to in relation to this house that we haven't covered?
Not particularly. I just think it's a standout example of designing to the constraints of a site, and this site imposes a lot of constraints, not just the terrain, topography, northern aspect, or it isn't. It actually faces southwest, but that's where the view is. But you've also got to get in some north and east light into the home to make it better to live in, and then obviously you've got vegetation and fire and those sorts of things, and I think this home probably meets all of those challenges really well.
Great, Ed. Thanks very much for your take on that.